Let's see. Hey, Sonny. Thank you for coming on today.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's just so cool to hear everything that you're doing. And yeah, you're doing a lot. I know you just wrapped up another episode of your own series, and you seem like you're a jack of a few trades, actually.
I do. I like to do a lot of things. I like to keep busy. Yeah, so my series, those who don't know, my series is called A Series About a Series, and it does star a certain somebody next to me
Oh, yeah.
who's also in there with me. But yeah, so episode three is almost finished wrapping. We've finished a lot of scenes. There's still only a couple left. Yeah, so episode three, almost done. But I am still editing certain scenes, and then we will be filming episode four shortly. So I'm really glad with the way it's moving forward. Episodes one and two are available on YouTube. So I'm really enjoying it, making dreams come true.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And what inspired you to get into writing?
For me, I was someone who always was really big into movies, TV shows ever since I was a kid. And me and my brother, sometimes we play with our action figures and we pretend that we were making movies. And obviously that stopped over time. But I would still always think of movies and stuff in my head. And I was like, oh, if I did this, I can make such a good movie. And then I said, well, why don't I do something about it instead of just running my mouth? And then I said, well, make a movie or a show. But I obviously don't have all that kinds of money. But I did say, I said, I could write it. So then I started working on stories, writing notes first. And then I started writing one story after another. And then after years, eventually I said, okay, when there was a story in my head, what I came, so I was born in England, but raised in Chicago. So most of my living has been in Illinois. But for a little bit of time, I moved to Wisconsin. And after a few years there, I moved back to Chicago with my fiance Maria, who does also work on the show too, who you've met. And then when I came back to Chicago, I said, okay, I need to do something in film. I need to get into film, even if I'm working as an extra, if I have small parts, stand-in parts, anything. Just get into the film industry. And then when I did started to get into it, I started going to like film meetups, networking events, and I just started seeing a story in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, there's definitely a story in the filmmaking industry in Chicago slash Illinois. And then I came up with a story called A Series About a Series. I wrote it, and then this one, I said, this one I can film here. This one I can work on. This one doesn't need a huge budget. Obviously, one day I would like to make it into a big budget show, but I said, but right now I can make it indie style. So I'm gonna get to work on that. So that's what I did. I got to work, and then I made my first pilot with the help of many others, including yourself. Playing a big part. Got a cast crew together, and we made a series about a series, episode one pilot.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to work on. I remember, and um, I would want to know what was writing your first screenplay like? What were like some of the challenges you found?
So for me, I wrote, usually stories, and they were script like, so they were like scripts already. So I put it this way, like a lot of the writing community would say that's more like a screenplay, and then in film they'd say more that's more like a novel. So it was kind of in between. But I looked at it and I said, some of my stories, I said I could adapt these into professional screenplays. So for me, it was taking, yeah, out of all my stories, a series about a series was the first one that I adapted to screenplay form. So I took the pilot, I learned about the actual screenplays and adapted into it, entered some contests, would get some feedback, and sometimes people would say, "Oh, this is wrong," or "Fix this," and I would look back and correct my work, and eventually, it started to do good, and eventually people caught on to it, and as you've seen the script, you've obviously played the role of Dorothy in it, so yeah, eventually. But difficulties for me was just more of a learning thing, taking a story I already had and learning to adapt it. So yeah.
Yeah, and also you direct a series about a series, which is really cool. You wrote a series about a series, and you're also directing it. Was a series about a series the main reason you got into directing, or did something else inspire you to get into directing?
For me, it's more of most of my stories. The plan is whenever I write a story, I always see it as somewhere either between a movie or a show. And I'm like, I know there's a certain way I want it. So if I'm somebody more like there's that saying, if you want something done, you got to do it yourself. So I'm like, you know what, I would like to direct it because I know there's a, I see a vision in my head, I see a story in my head, and I want to be the one to take it from my head to the page to the screen. So that's why I said I'm gonna direct it. Obviously learn about directing, and I want to be the one to direct everybody to bring this vision of mine to life.
Awesome. And then you also did casting for a series about a series
Yes.
also. So, um, I know you had a lot of submissions. I remember seeing your Facebook posts. They were getting like a few hundred likes, comments. So
Yeah.
I just wondering when you were like casting each of the roles, what were you looking for in actors?
For me, I mainly looked at like who do I feel brings this character to life the most. But as I was having a lot of people audition, because like I said, a lot of people were interested. Then I tried to get in touch with everybody who said interested, and then some people like were able to go forward with the auditions. And I said, oh, I picked the perfect timing to get into filmmaking because as soon as I started making the story, the pandemic hit. So obviously, I was learning all these things, and everything changed. But then I said, okay, you know what? I can still do auditions through online, virtually, through Zoom. So that's how I did it. But what I was looking at people was, who I think, the looks do matter a bit. Like, oh, this person looks like the character how I imagine them. But quickly I learned like, okay, how do they sound like the character? I really looked at, do they bring the spirit of this character to life? Also how do we get along? Availability is one thing too as well. Because the one thing with casting, I wish that everybody would know this, is that if somebody doesn't get a part, it doesn't mean you did bad. It's just that maybe they felt somebody was more perfect for that character. And then even sometimes there was somebody like, oh, this person is a good actor or actress. We get along. I hope I work with them one day. But I'm like, I see them for another character that comes later in the show. So sometimes that is the thing. You have to choose who you think is the best for that role, who you get along with. Yeah. So that was the thing. It was really fun. Auditions, the audition part of when it comes to the series is always a part I really like because I'm meeting a lot of interesting people and I'm seeing people's different takes on certain characters of mine. Like, oh, this is an interesting take. This is a little bit different, but I still like it. Or sometimes there's somebody I'm like, this is exactly how I imagine the character. It's always awesome when that happens.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I know it must have been like a lot of just back and forth and watching videos
Oh yeah.
and also I remember like even when a series about a series was filming, um there were some challenges, but what would you say is the biggest challenge when filming an independent series?
For me, it was finding locations. That was one thing I really had trouble with because obviously it's not a big budget thing. I don't have that much money. Of course, I'd like to one day have a whole load of money, but it was finding locations. And then you let me know about IndieDB Studios. You say, hey, I heard about this place. So I was checking it out. And yes, that place really helped out a lot. And then sometimes it was, I can make this part of my house look like this and go into people's houses, so things like that. For me, it was locations, and then like I said, then sometimes when you go to studios or something, audio loudness. Sometimes you have to deal with other people being loud, and then sometimes you just maybe somebody down the block or something. Maybe somebody's having construction done. Like, oh, what can I do with that? So, yeah, that's what I would say. Finding locations, but then once I got locations, the only thing is sometimes the noise of others
Oh yeah, I
can be
remember that
difficult to deal with.
concert. Or was it like a music video that was shooting in the other studio that was
Yes. Yes, one day, while we were filming a scene for a series about a series, it happened to be it was the day I was gonna first time direct the most people I've directed, so I'm a bit anxious about that, but I'm like, "Okay, stay calm, you know how to do this," and then I get to the studio, and it's the most packed day I've ever still to this day, I haven't ever seen the studio that packed. There was a rap video filming, so when we first got there, they were actually in the room that we were gonna be filming in, and I did have to say, "Oh, excuse me, we this is our room. We booked this room." So then someone said, "Oh, I think it's the other room." I said, "No, this
yeah.
is our room." I made sure. So then they made sure they left. They got all their stuff, but it was still like there were so many people in the halls, the room over, the big studio. So it was definitely an interesting day on set. But I did say, so there's always got to be something that happens to, you know, a bit of an obstacle. It can't be too easy. There has to be some kind of challenges. So
Oh yeah.
that was that day's challenge. And then I'm somebody I always like to, you know, try to look at the positive side of things. And there were certain takes where you could hear other people around. So I said, you know what, maybe I could use that as some background noise for other scenes.
Oh yeah, that's a good thing, especially if it's like a noisy classroom setting or
Yeah, even too, like, because it was chatter that you didn't hear specifically what anybody was saying. So sometimes in other scenes, hey, I could use that as just background chatter. So always got to find a way to, you know, turn a negative into a positive.
yeah, definitely. And do you have any outside of filming, do you have any other hobbies that you like doing?
Me, I'm really into, as you can see, comic books. So I do have a podcast. Me and my friends, we host I have the code, I host the Codex podcast, which is with the Codex station. So there are a bunch of comic book related shows on there. So once a week, every week, me and my friends, we get together and we host the Codex podcast, talk about all things comic book related. And yeah, so as you can see, I really like to read comic books. I also am really into mixed martial arts. That's something I more just watch that. I don't I don't get that. I think the weight cutting would be way too tough. I have a bad sweet tooth, so
Oh, it's
cutting
okay.
weight would be too much for me. Yeah. But yeah, so that's something I watch, you know, watch a lot of mixed martial arts and obviously movies, TV shows, and then two books I do like to read it a lot as well. So those are some of the other things that I like to do.
Definitely. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. You know, I always love talking about my dreams and, you know, my work, my projects, all stuff like that. So thank you for having me on here.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Take care.
You too.